Name immediately brings to mind images of a bold and brave Indian woman who, at every step, had the courage to fearlessly stand up for what she believed in. She defies conventions and asks questions, the answers to which demand a searching self-analysis. She was born in 1934 on the 31st of March in the Malabar coastal region of Kerala.
When I was a child, I lived in Calcutta. But for vacations, we were taken to my grandmother's place in Malabar. I felt that I was actually sailing with one foot in Bengali culture, another in Malayali culture. If I had 3 feet, I would have said I was sailing with the third foot in British culture.
After spending a good part of her childhood in Malabar, Kamaladas decided to let her life come full circle and came back to settle in Trivandrum. Amidst the engulfing solace of nature, which offers its rich bounties in the way of the sea, the beaches, and the coconut trees. Kamaladas' personality finds total identification with the crashing waves of the undulating sea. Let us take a peep into her personality. When exactly did you begin writing poetry? And what was your first poem?
I don't know whether my writing could be called poetry at that stage, but I started writing verse when I was a very small child. Perhaps I was 6. I think the first poem that I wrote was of a doll that was lost. Lost in the sense it was given away. My grandmother forced me to part with that doll when a child came visiting and she kept crying for the doll. My grandmother told me that I should not be jealous, I should not be selfish, I should give away my doll, and probably that hurt me a great deal, the fact that I had to lose it to another child. I wrote that down as a poem, and it was read at my school.
What were the influences that spurred you on to write poetry?
My grandmother's house had a library and a large collection of books by foreign authors and also Sanskrit books. I was very happy reading those days, and I think Walt Whitman impressed me, his easy way of writing. It is like someone, taking a stroll.
Writing at such an early age would presuppose a great deal of academic activity.
afraid I could never complete anything. But then, of course, I don't think I learnt anything from school. I don't believe in formal education. I feel that you should make your choice, decide on the subjects that you want to master, and get tutors to help you. That's how I grew. That's how my mother grew.
Why was there a break in your education?
It wasn't possible for me to pass in maths. So there was no other way. So my father thought, send her off. And my classmates were surprised to hear that I was going to get married, and it was a kind of punishment. But at that time probably it didn't seem like a punishment. I was given money to buy clothes. I was taught to wear a sari. I was given jewelry. And I really felt marvelous. So it was like moving from one father to another. And I thought that second father would be a kinder one. Fathers are fathers.
However, marriage did little to stop the creative flow of a person who was deeply involved in expressing her innermost feelings. Kamaladas established herself as a poet of repute after she wrote a poem called Composition. This poem, which is also her favorite, was published by Nissim Ezekiel in the Poetry Journal.
Ultimately, I have come face to face with the sea. In the beginning, the sea was only the wind's ceaseless whisper in a shell. But lying beside my grandmother, quite often I thought that I could hear at night the surf breaking on the shore. It was written during the night when we were staying in a house at Cadell Road, opposite the sea. Probably the sea entered it and strengthened the lines. I think of the sea when I read that. That's my favorite poem.
Kamaladas does not claim to be a poet of wide reading and formal education. Her poems do not rest upon any consciously assumed framework of philosophic or religious values. Her subject matter, basically, is her personality. Beautiful, sensitive, bold, and tormented.
Probably I'm not acquainted with the trends in modern poetry. I don't read much. I hardly ever get time to read these days. So I'm not quite up to date. But when I write, my poems, of course, don't follow any trend at all. It's that way with my lifestyle too. I haven't followed any fashion. Probably I feel I can't adjust with fashions. And I'm not very traditional either, because I think of tradition as a cage. I would feel suffocated. I'm modern to the extent that I'm free. I'm like a bird freed from a cage. And I use that freedom in my writing. I'm free because I'm not impressed or inspired by outside influences. My poetry is like a bore well. I dig within and I find sweet and clear water. The external factors don't affect my thinking, not much anyway.
Kamaladas's response to the external world, despite her inner restlessness, is characterized by an admirable sense of poise. Her family house in Malabar figures in several of her poems. Although the house is now cobwebbed, it is still paradise on earth for her. The poem, My Grandmother's House, celebrates this house as her great comfort and binder with an enviable past.
There is a house now far away where once I received love. The woman died, The house withdrew into silence. Snakes moved among books I was then too young to read, and my blood turned cold like the moon. How often I think of going there to peer through blind eyes of windows, or just listen to the frozen air, or in wild despair pick an armful of darkness to bring it here to lie behind my bedroom door like a brooding dog. You cannot believe, darling, can you, that I lived in such a house and was proud and loved. I who have lost my way and beg now at strangers' doors to receive love, at least in small change. My grandmother's house speaks of my loneliness, now that grandmother is no longer there to comfort me and understand me. And it's a kind of yearning for her love, which is what I probably miss. That has come into some textbooks here. Even in Kerala, I think they've taken that. That has been misunderstood too, because there is a line which says that I'm looking for love, at least in small change. They thought, well, that is wicked too. What I meant was, at least I want to be given the crumbs. It only shows, that I was lonely when I was young, and there was no way of removing that loneliness after grandmother's death. I think she was my favorite human being.
The poem Blood not only celebrates the house, but the grandmother as well. Her images of the house and the sea can be clearly traced back to her childhood association with her Malabar house.
When we were children, my brother and I, and always playing on the sands, drawing birds and animals, our great-grandmother said one day, "You see this house of ours, now 300 years old, it's falling to little bits before our very eyes." It talks of my old house, the ancestral home, which none of us could repair because we were never rich enough to repair. And my grandmother's fondness for it. It is praised by Bruce King, who considered it the best poem I had written. It goes well with the foreign audiences. I have tried reciting that in several countries, and I think they've liked that the most. It's very simple for one thing. It's like a child's talk.
Kamaladas is not only a poet of the nostalgic past. She has to her credit a number of books on the different aspects and stages of her personality.
The first published book was Summer in Calcutta, which is brought out in '65 by a publisher in Delhi. And it contains some of the poems which had won for me the Poetry Prize sponsored by the PEN Center of Manila. Second volume was The Descendants, brought out by P. Lal of the Writers' Workshop in Calcutta. Those contained, I think, some love poems. I was experiencing love at that time. It was easy for me to fall in love. I was very young. The third volume is called The Old Playhouse. And as is normal with me, I think I must have filled it with love poems, because I'm an emotional human being. When I was about 20 or 21, I read in the newspaper that 20% of the inmates of brothels contained children, and I was shocked. And I found out from my husband's friends that there were brothels in Bombay. There was a red light district where the poor prostitutes lived. So I kept pleading with my husband to take me there. And he told me it was very dangerous to go there. For a woman, it's very dangerous. But all the same, we engaged a taxi, told the taxi man to stop the car near some brothel and then open the bonnet and pretend there was something wrong with the car, so that I would get at least 5 or 10 minutes to watch. And we went past buildings which had bars, iron bars, and these girls were standing behind the bars, and they looked like sickly parrots. Every one of them looked sickly to me, but they had paint on their faces. And I wanted to cry, because here I was, advantaged, with a husband, with enough money to feed myself. And here were these poor creatures standing there, showing a knee, showing some part of the thigh. And they jeered at me, they laughed. Then I found a young girl of about 11 or 12 coming out on the pavement and with a friend of hers playing hopscotch. And that, I was fascinated by that. She was from the brothel. Then after about 5 minutes, when some client went up the stairs, someone within called out, "Rukmani," and spoke in Marathi. And then I thought, here is a young prostitute. And this girl was telling the companion, who was probably 14, just don't move this. There was a piece of brick they were playing with. Don't move this, I'll be back in 5 minutes. And she went up, and she came back with her hair all flying, little girl, perspiring, and she went on playing. And that really intrigued me.
The book, My Story, which made national headlines and shocked the finer sensibilities of people, was criticized for advocating adultery.
I think I was about 37 when I wrote that book. Too early really to write an autobiography. I was lying in hospital and people told me that I was dying. If I was really going to die, I was not going to suffer from any bad reputation. I would produce a book and leave them something to sell, a marketable commodity, and then take my leave. This is not the first time a woman has been exploited. It has happened before, it will happen again, unless we raise our voices. I shouldn't have written that story. I can't live it down. Because I survived that illness and came home. And I have been stoned. And pelting goes on even now, although many years have passed. They say, oh, you wrote my story. How could you write of adultery?
There is certainly more to Kamaladas's work than merely the daring of a woman who, while setting immense store by humility in human relationships, can still feel, think and speak like an emancipated woman.
That's why I consider women's writing to be superior to men's writing, more sensitive. Some people say we don't have experience, we don't go to the stock exchange, you can't report on what is happening in the banks, you can't report on the political scene. Because I don't think if you are a poet and you need to write poetry, you need to know much about the stock exchange or the price of shares or any of these things that matter in a world of commerce. You write about yourself, you write about your own discovery. There are so many discoveries that you make within your lifetime. Men's writings resemble a pond, very wide, but somewhat shallow, or filled with muddy water. I prefer to write like a woman.
Kamaladas does not limit her views only to feelings and emotions. She also has a lot to say about contemporary poets.
Mr. Mexican, I would consider to be a guru. we all try to learn something from him. I admire his craftsmanship, the ease with which he writes poetry, the sense of humor, his discipline. A.K. Ramanujan is equally talented. He is also a brilliant translator. He has translated Tamil poetry into English. Jayanta Mahapatra is another kind of poet. He is more sensitive than the first two. And I haven't met him, but I have met many people who knew, who still knows Jayanta Mahapatra, who lives in Orissa. I first got acquainted with his poetry years ago when I was the poetry editor of the Illustrative Weekly of India. And when I read his lines, I was astonished. Seemed like a very sensitive person. And I was so proud to publish his poems.
A public figure's life is like an open book. But somewhere or the other, a few private niches are carved. Apart from being a poet, Kamaladas is also a mother, a wife, and a friend. In the words of her son,
we are extremely proud to have a mother like this. She's a celebrity mother, and as a mother she has been extremely kind. She has certainly made her childhood far more exciting than most conventional mothers do, and she's still a mother to me.
Think loving thoughts, probably you won't age very fast. Be fond of people, be forgiving,